There's a change today.
Welcome to the Warrant and Finance Committee meeting of May 20th, 2014. We're here to review the warrant for town meeting. First item on the agenda is roll call. We do have 5 members here today, so we have enough to render some votes. Okay, there's not a whole lot on the agenda here, basically just the warrant itself and some meeting announcements. So the next item on the agenda here is approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Move approval. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve agenda as written, I assume?
Yes.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and approval of minutes. There are no minutes to approve, and there's no unfinished business and new business. Chair remarks. The primary purpose of this joint meeting of the Warrant and Finance Committee and Select Board is to make recommendation regarding the town warrant articles for budget year 2014-2015. The proposed budget was discussed in the workshop of March 29th, and the warrant was released by the Board of Selectmen on May 9th and reviewed by this committee in the workshops of May 12th and May 13th. The workshops were open to the public with provision given to accommodate any comments, questions, or concerns offered, and were recorded for a cable channel 26 broadcast. Those workshops were the ideal time to present warrant input to both the Board of Selectmen and the Warrant and Finance Committee. At today's meeting, the Warrant and Finance Committee will for the first time be discussing these articles among ourselves, resolving any remaining questions with the assistance of the Board of Selectmen and possibly other parties, and I don't think we're going to have any other parties at this point, and then voting our recommendations, which will be duly recorded and placed on the warrant for town meeting on Saturday, June 14th, 9 a.m. at the Acton Elementary School. As fact-finding and discussion proceed this evening, I ask that this remain at all times respectful and professional and relevant to the article which is under consideration. This year we have more than the usual number of articles, plus 2 proposed agreements, and as usual, a limited amount of time. Thank you. Okay, public questions, comments. I see very little public here, so we will move on. Town warrant discussion and recommendation. Okay, so moving to the warrant. What we're going to do is essentially have on the screen what we're talking about at the moment. I'm going to really try, it doesn't always work, but I'm going to really try to sort of just move on here, not try to recap a whole lot of what went on at the workshops. We did in fact have 2 workshops to cover the entire warrant, and we actually don't have more than one for actually rendering our votes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
We do not have a secretary here taking minutes this evening.
I am actually serving that function this evening, and Ted is actually going to be sort of dovetailing that with me, so we should we are fairly confident that we'll get it right. But thank you for that.
And if we don't, they'll go back to the videotape tomorrow.
Right. That is correct. Okay, so
on that note, Lorraine is doing better, and she says she's getting out tomorrow and coming back to work, so we'll see what happens from there.
That's good news. I think she had a small stroke. Okay, so what I'm going to end up doing really is for the most part, I'm going to record my votes on the paper warrant as we go. I'm going to be actually reading from the overhead, and I would certainly hope that someone would say, you know, basically point out if and when, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if and when what I'm reading does not agree with what's on the paper warrant. And there have been a few changes, but I'm pretty sure that all of it is accommodated in what you're seeing overhead here. So Article 6, to see if the town will authorize the Board of Selectmen to appropriate and expend monies from the undesignated fund balance with the advice of the Warrant and Finance Committee for the purchase of equipment or to use as they deem advisable to meet unanticipated expenses and emergencies that occurred during fiscal year 2015. A maximum expenditure of $15,000.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the article, or to recommend the article amended to strike the portion that says, or the phrase that says, with the advice of the Warrant and Finance Committee.
Okay. It's been moved. Do we have a second on that? Okay, so.
Yes. Second.
Okay, so Tom, motion, and Joan seconded.
Nancy.
Well, actually, Joan raised her hand, so.
Joan did, yes.
You tertiaried. So to strike with the advice of the Warrant and Finance Committee. So that motion is on the floor for discussion. Mr. Gore.
Well, I think the portion that I'm making a motion to strike serves no purpose except to confuse the body, since there is no prescribed authority that the Warrant and Finance Committee has. And the portion of the article to be struck implies that the Warrant and Finance Committee actually has a role here, but in fact it doesn't. Or at least it's not set forth.
Okay, any further discussion?
Paul?
Yes.
Isn't it in the new ordinance that, when you wrote the ordinance, you took out advise and consent and you changed it?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is, actually, that's a pretty appropriate place to go to here. I'm reasonably sure I have a copy of the ordinance here. A moment. But what it does point out, I think the ordinance clarified that there is no consent element, and that was sort of news to me. There is no consent element. There we go. To Warrant and Finance, but there is certainly advisory. So we're looking at Part 1. Item D, Part 1, Item D, and this is actually up on actonmaine.org. There's a page out there that actually lists the ordinances, and you should find this up on Warrant and Finance. So 1D says the committee may also provide non-binding recommendations to warrant article authors during article development, but shall not author a warrant article. The committee, let's see, let me just see if there's anything that's a little more germane here. Yes, the committee shall provide its recommendation to the selectmen regarding proposed actions in accordance with any previously enacted warrant article which is written to require the recommendation of a Warrant and Finance Committee. So I would say D and E definitely make that phrase relevant to Warrant and Finance's admittedly not exalted powers, but powers nevertheless. It's within our purview to so advise. And fully agreed that there's no requirement that the selectmen take that advice, however well intended. But it is relevant. So anyway, that's what the ordinance has to say about it. And I would say that there's no real compelling reason for me to vote for the motion, because I think that phrase belongs there. I mean, if there's a choice between having an extra few folks look at something, you know, especially where we have a $15,000, what amounts to a $15,000 blank check, if there's any kind of review that can be given by another couple of sets of eyes, even though it's not mandatory that the opinions expressed are accepted, it makes sense to me, as opposed to not having it at all. It's at least a potential belt and suspenders. Any further discussion?
My position would be it just clarifies the issue for the body. It doesn't make it clear.
Well, keeping in mind that previously it used to say advice and consent, and now it just says advice.
I'm aware of the change.
Okay, thank you. This is actually a good spot to point out that as we go through the evening, if it turns out that there is, for whatever reason, there's like a negative motion, and that negative motion does not prevail, the bottom line is that we want to make it clear to the town body what the Warrant and Finance Committee actually voted. So there may be a time when we'll go for an immediate vote with a reversed motion, just to be clear on what in fact we're voting for. In other words, we don't want to vote down a negative motion ultimately on town floor, because it's confusing what in heck, you get too many nested negatives and it gets really confusing on town floor. So we're going for transparency and clarity on town floor, and if we need to kind of play a little game here and there with it to essentially vote true to what everyone feels, but also make it clear on town floor what that is, we will do so. So it may or may not turn out that way with this one, but anyway, any further discussion about this motion? Okay, so so I'm going to essentially handle this, right, so the motion was actually a modification of what's on the article.
Recommended the article amended as.
Amended. So we can do that in one shot.
Delete that portion.
So, all in favor of the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 6, but striking the phrase "with the advice of the Warrant and Finance Committee," so signify. So we have 3, okay? All opposed to that motion, so signify. Okay, so 3-2. So it looks like we're done here. So I'm just gonna, so 2 was Paul and Holly, Tom, Nancy, Joan, 3. So the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 6 while striking that particular paragraph carries 3-2. Thank you. We move on. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to reimburse the members of the Acton Fire and Rescue for any national disaster or state of emergency or other emergency situation that exceeds 8 hours in duration at the same rates as established by Article 27, to be assigned at the fire chief's discretion. Firefighters or rescue members, same as laborer. Fire chief, same as road commissioner. Funds to come from the undesignated fund balance. Seek a motion. Yeah, and we'll talk about what this says in the comments once we get.
Move to accept the article as written.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend accepting the article as written. It's on the floor for discussion. The only thing I want to point out is that this is essentially the same as it's been the last few years. It was changed back in 2011. It's been the same for several years, and as well as the rates. The rates that we're talking about here is the labor rates, which are $11 to $18 per hour. Road commissioners $24.70 per hour, and the fire chief still gets to determine who gets what rate. But presumably, it's pretty clear cut with the, fire chief and everybody else. But who gets the other rate is the question. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 7 as written, so signify. Thank you. Article 8. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to dispose of surplus town-owned equipment having a value of less than or equal to $500 on such terms and conditions as they deem advisable, and to execute any necessary documents to accomplish said purpose. All equipment having a value of more than $500 shall be put out to public bid. Funds received from such sales shall be placed in a capital reserve account for the associated department. Looking for motion.
Make a motion to recommend the article as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend that the town accept Article 8 as written. On the table for discussion.
The only difference are funds received from such sales shall be placed in a capital reserve account for the associated department. And as we talked about before, we have the 2 fire trucks up for sale. When they're sold, then that money will go into the fire truck fund.
And it makes sense for basically anything else, any department that has equipment, if it needs to be disposed of, that they would get the benefit of those funds. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 8 as written, so signify. Thank you. 0. The motion carries. Article 9, to see if the town will vote to put the funds received from the sale of the tax-acquired property during the year 2014-15 into the Capital Improvement Fund.
I move we recommend the article as written.
Second.
Who was the second on that?
Joe.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that the committee recommend acceptance of Article 9 as written. On the floor for discussion. And this has been the same in my memory for the last few years.
Started 2010.
Yep. Any further discussion on this one? Not that we've had any. All in favor of the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 9 as written, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous in favor. Motion carries. Okay, Article 10, to see if the town will authorize the Board of Selectmen to sell any tax-acquired property and issue a quitclaim deed for the same. Sale to be by sealed bids or public auction if to other than the owner of record at the time of foreclosure, and no selectman during the term of his or her office may acquire from the town any interest in real estate acquired by the town on account of non-payment of taxes unless the owner of record at the time of foreclosure was the selectman or the son, daughter, spouse, or parent of the selectman. Looking for a motion.
Motion to recommend the article as written.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry.
I know somebody beat out
I did.
Holly, thank you. Been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 10 as written. On the floor for discussion. This is one that was changed in 2011. It's been the same for the last 3 years. Seems to make sense, which I guess is the most important point, and there hasn't been any conflict on town floor. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend acceptance of Article 10 as written, so signify. Thank you. 5-0, the motion carries. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen upon request of the treasurer to allow the treasurer to waive foreclosure of a tax lien on a specified property for a specified year with reference to the tax lien certificate recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds in circumstances where the Board of Selectmen determine that it is in the best interest of the town of Acton to waive foreclosure.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question here, just with respect to the clarity of this article again. The phrase "upon request of the treasurer," does that assume that the treasurer must request? I would think in a lot of the cases where the town would choose to not foreclose on a property, that the selectman would be far more current on the condition than the treasurer would be.
Well, I'm going to allow limited debate here just because it's not on the floor officially yet, just because it might affect your motion, but basically, as I read this, it will not actually be invoked for the selectmen to actually make that decision on their own. It looks to me like it requires two parties in order to do that.
The tax collector is the only one that can make the decision to do that, but we can request her not to do it if we knew, like I talked about the property that's down in Milton Mills that has a toxic waste dump. If we were aware, then we could tell Michelle not to do it. If she becomes aware of one that, the taxes are very minor and it would cost us more to foreclose, or some other issue, then she could come and ask us if we would allow her to waive it. But she has the final say on the taxes.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Thank you.
put the article on the floor so that we
Let's do
can
it.
move this formally? I will recommend adoption of the article as written, and then we can move forward
Do we
and
have a second?
amend that if we
Second.
choose to.
Okay,
discussion.
so it's been moved and seconded to recommend acceptance as written. It's on the floor officially. Mr. Gore, you made the motion. You have the floor.
Okay. This appears to me to require that the treasurer make the request of the selectmen, and I think I made my point a few minutes ago when I said I think the selectmen are probably more aware of situations where the town may not wish to foreclose. I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be easier, and I understand that the treasurer is the only one who can make the final decision, if this wouldn't be more clear if we just deleted that phrase, upon the request of the treasurer.
Yeah, I know that the taxes are committed to the tax collector, but are unpaid taxes committed to the treasurer in the same way? Because she's the one that collects them.
She's the one that puts all the liens out.
Right.
She does all of that work and has to.
Right.
And she has, when she puts the liens out, she has to do all the research to find out who already has liens on the property, whether the bank's involved, mortgage companies, somebody else has some, way into the property. So our treasurer is the one that determines where the tax bills have to go in order to meet the law. The selectmen don't do that.
But if the taxes are committed to the tax collector, maybe it should be to the tax collector and treasurer, I don't know.
I think it should be, excuse me.
Delete the whole thing.
I just think we can delete that section out of there, and then there's common law that describes how the process must proceed. There may be any number of people who would be current on a situation with respect to any property who could make the request, and then it could be duly executed. But as this is worded, it appears as though the treasurer is the only one who can initiate that request. And if the treasurer is ignorant of the situation and others are not current on it, then they don't have the authority to bring it to the treasurer or make the request to the treasurer.
Paul, can we go back to the year that we had them all reviewed by the attorney and see
Sure.
if that was one of the ones that had questions on it?
This will be the last year where this will be readily visible. So the legal opinion, yep, here we go. So this is actually where we broke out one article, which is a long-time article, into two separate articles. So this second one here in this legal opinion is the one that we're looking at right now, to see if the town, and it's phrased exactly, the way you see it. Oh, excuse me, this is an image here, which is why it's not selecting, but that last paragraph there is what we're talking about. So I guess it really comes down to, well, actually, before I even discuss this phrase, more of a point of order. On town floor, are we barking up the wrong tree here? Can these articles on town floor have their wording changed by a claim of the legislative body, which is the townspeople, based on any recommendations that we make, or are we just sort of, wasting our time here?
No, we can amend the article.
The town floor can amend the article. Like the last one you did, you're recommending that the article should be
Right.
changed, and then we'll vote on it Thursday and we'll make our recommendation, then the town decides which they want to go,
Okay,
or they could change.
So they
it
can
more.
change that wording.
Right.
Basically, they can do anything except raise a dollar amount.
Right.
Okay.
But when we had the attorney go through this, I mean, all the articles have been, a lot of times changed on the floor or changed from wherever, and they weren't legal. So this is what, the legal opinion of the town attorney that we paid to have go through the whole warrant, this is what the article that was recommended to the town in 2011, and that's what we've used since then. So, it's up to you guys what you want to recommend.
Your attorney says to do away with the article altogether, if you read what he wrote, or she wrote, rather.
Well, the recommendation was to split the one into two,
Split the
because it
warrant
was
article
two
into two
substantially
articles.
different things.
Oh, okay.
There was all of
Oh,
it
it
was
was
in the
one.
one that said, that
I
gave us
see.
permission
Oh,
to
okay,
give quitclaim
okay.
deeds. She made us split them, and then she rewrote the bottom part of it with the treasurer in there, so that was the legal opinion, so.
So one article that essentially was trying to do the work of two, per legal opinion, was split into two separate articles that did two slightly different things on the same topic. And that would be the article that we just saw and
Oh,
this
I
one that we're
see, I see,
considering
all
now.
right. Yeah,
So back in 2010 or 11 actually is when that happened.
Well, the issue is a very small one.
Yep.
And odds are of minor consequence, but again, it just confuses the issue here of who has authority or responsibility to do what. And that muddies the water on the floor of the town meeting. That having been said,
Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Now, the motion on the floor right now is to recommend acceptance as written. So if you have a mind to, recommend dropping that phrase, you're going to want to vote this one down, and I will, based on what we're talking about now, or actually, better yet, I suggest you amend the motion before we even get through this. So in other words, we'll amend the motion. If in fact you want to go with dropping that phrase, and then we'll vote on that, and then we'll go with the whole enchilada. So rather than finishing up the article and then sort of revisiting it, we're in the article now. You're entitled to amend it if you'd like. So I'm going to look for another motion and another second if in fact somebody wants to do that. Alrighty then. So the motion on the floor here is to recommend approval of Article 11 as written. Any further discussion? All in favor, so signify. So I have 4. All opposed?
having made the motion to
Thank you.
recommend the article as written, I will vote in the negative.
Well, and in fact, technically, I don't think you're allowed to vote in the negative. You have to vote for your own motion.
No, I
but-
don't. No, I don't.
No?
No, I don't have to vote for my own motion.
I don't think the motion police are going to come after
No,
either of
no,
us.
no. It's okay. Just
Okay, so.
raises the question at the
4-1,
meeting, that's all.
got it. And I'm going to underline that phrase as well. Just so for my edification. Okay, so moving on. Article 12. To see if the town will vote to have real estate and personal property taxes first payment come due on October 15, 2014, and the second payment on April 15, 2015.
Move to approve the article as written,
Second.
or recommend the
Been
article.
moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 12 as written. On the floor for discussion. This is a housekeeping article. It's been unchanged for certainly several years. And the only notable thing here is that we've had Tuesdays in prior years, at least the ones that are on here, and these are Wednesdays that apparently is not particularly germane to any important consideration. But essentially they're 6 months apart. They're roughly approximate to what we've been doing in the past, and they don't seem to be unduly flawed as such. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 12 as written, so signify. Thank you. 5-0, the motion carries. Incidentally, the motion carried in Article 11 as well. I don't think we've had any, we've had one split kind of on Article 6, but everything is carried, one way or another.
Could I just ask?
Yes.
a question? I've heard accept and I've heard approve, or should I put down accept?
Yeah,
You said accept and approve.
what
where
I'd
you
like
said
to
approve.
do, factoring in the human element here,
Approve articles as written for,
let me just see what we've got here as a general schema for
got
past
1, 2, 3,
meetings here.
4, 5.
So, approve, well, this says ought to pass, this says approve as written, So I would say, the propensity here would be to say approve as written, or approve as amended, or
Okay,
however
approve
it
as
turns
written.
out.
Okay.
So the word approve, I guess, is what we're going to
Okay.
go for here.
I think, actually, I think that word should be recommend, because our objective
Yes.
is to recommend to the town
Excuse me,
meeting.
yes.
We're
Well,
recommending to the town meeting.
if we look at the full phrase here, this does say Select Board recommends and Finance Committee recommends. So we're recommending approval. And I'm pretty sure that's what I've been throwing the word recommend in there, but I understand that I am not necessarily fully consistent with accept and approve. So
All right, so we'll put recommend approval.
whatever I say after the word recommend, you here approve.
Okay.
Thank you. Unless, of course, it's recommend, not ought not to
Disapprove.
pass. That's a whole different story. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, Article 13. To see what interest the town will vote to charge on all taxes after October 15, 2014 and April 15, 2015. Maximum rate of interest allowed is 7% per annum.
Move to recommend approval as written.
Okay, take a look at the motions in past years. In this one, it's a little weird.
You have to say percent, you have to say
move
percent.
Actually, recommending a percentage.
Recommend 7%.
Okay, so Nancy, we have a motion here recommending 7% per annum. Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to recommend 7% per annum. Is there any discussion? It's on the floor. The dates do match our previous article. And I think I thought this one had a little rework previously. But, the maximum rate is 7%. And that's what we've been doing certainly since I've been in this particular committee. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend 7% per annum, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous, 5-0, the motion carries. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to set the interest rate to be paid by the town on abated taxes at 3% pursuant to 36 MRSA 506-A.
Recommend 3%.
Okay, so now, just to throw you a curveball, and we will talk about this one. This one is actually phrased a little differently than the last one, even though I would suspect that it probably shouldn't be. But it says, if the town will vote to set the interest rate at 3%. So this one would be an accept or reject, and then presumably if it's rejected, then we would be offering an alternate rate.
Adoption
Recommend,
of the
I don't know,
article is
I'd
written.
still say recommend approving 3%. I don't know. Would you?
Okay,
It works.
Yeah.
we can go with that. So we have a motion on the floor to recommend approving 3%
Per annum.
per annum. And do we have a second on that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for the committee to recommend 3% per annum for Article 15. Essentially approving it as written. So I'll kind of throw that all in there. On the floor for discussion. According to legal review a few years back, it was made clear that, and in fact, that's where this article came from, because we didn't used to have it. So anytime this particular situation would come up, we actually had to pay interest at 7%, because we didn't specify otherwise. So we're allowed to pay out, under the circumstances stated here on abated taxes, up to 4% less than the other rate from Article, actually it's not 44, Article 13, up to 4% less. So my point here is basically, if the town ever goes with less than 7% in Article 13, this article as written will not provide full value. It's allowed to be up to 4 percentage points less than Article 13's rate. So perhaps, and nothing needs to happen this year, but perhaps we should consider phrasing Articles 13 and 14 similarly, so if whoever decides to go with a different rate on 13, then it will be a simple matter to subtract 4% from that and put an accommodating rate in Article 14. Right now, it's a little strange, because basically we're accepting the 3% or we're not.
Yeah, well, the 7% is set by the state, so the only time that'll change is if the state changes it, and then we will.
Well, yeah, but
change-
it could be less,
The state,
is what I'm
the
saying.
state sets the maximum, though. It could be, the town meeting could decide to make it 6%, in which case, or the town meeting could choose to make it 3%, in fact.
Right.
Which would make it matching. That's an option of the town meeting, so I think Paul's comments are well taken here.
So essentially, if we take, so say the town did vote for 6% on town floor, and we still have this article that's 3%, we're only getting 3% difference out of it when legally we could get 4% difference because of the way it's written. It's just, you know, if we had something a lot more significant to talk about at this very moment, we'd be probably talking about that, but this is in front of us right now, so I thought I would point out that we might want to consider rewriting this in future warrants.
I'm so glad you're coming.
We're
back
going
next
to
year.
miss you if you don't run again. You know, you're going to be by popular acclamation here.
Anyway, so having said what I needed to say, we can move on. Any further discussion on that? All in favor of the motion, and I want to just make sure I get this, to recommend paying 3% as written, or as written, so signify. And I think we have 5 there, thank you.
It's 5-0.
Yes. Motion carries. Article 15, to see if the town will vote to authorize the tax collector to accept the prepayment of taxes before tax commitment.
Move to approve the article as written.
Second.
Recommend approval. of the
Okay, it's been
article.
moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 15 as written. On the floor for discussion. This is another housekeeping article. It's been, essentially, it survived unscathed the legal review in 2011, which is saying something. And it's had no contention on town floor, you know, in the last several years. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approving Article 15 as written, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous, the motion carries. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to make application for and execute any documents related to any grant or donation, to accept any such grants or donations or any fees and appropriate such funds for their designated use, so long as they do not require matching funds or encumber the town in any way. The treasurer shall be notified of any grant applications, and a copy shall be kept on file in the treasurer's office.
I'll make a motion to recommend the article as written.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I heard Joan first. It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 16 as written. On the floor for discussion.
I just have a question for the selectmen. How are we going to assure that anybody who is filing an application for a grant in the name of the town makes the town aware and ultimately does file copies of the grant with the treasurer? Is there a mechanism in place for doing that?
They can't apply for a grant for the town without permission of the town. We just recently had some people that were interested in a block grant, and so we created a 6-month committee for them to meet here and with the liaison for the selectmen, and for them to talk about it and go through the process and everything else. But without the selectmen signing papers, they can't put a grant into anybody on behalf of the town. Only the selectmen can.
Or that's your experience so far to date anyway? For instance, if the recreation committee decided to search out a grant for something, you can't foresee a situation in which they could pursue that? Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
The only one that can and has is the Ambulance Association, but they have nothing to do with the
That's
town.
private, right?
Yeah.
Library Association?
They're also private too. That's why they're in the charities. They're no longer a town department. They don't want to be. We've tried to get them to come back and they don't want to.
It used to be fairly routine for the fire department to take it upon itself to do this, but I assume that issue has been dealt with.
Yeah, no, they don't apply for any grants without us.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so as you see in front of you here, basically in the past, so first off, this did get a little tweak from legal review in 2011. It's been unchanged since then. Essentially, it was unconditional that the funds would be accepted, and there was really no provision to ensure that there was an audit trail so that, you know, after the fact, perhaps years down the road, if we needed to know what the terms of a particular set of funds that the town received was or were, there's really no provision to make sure that we had a record of that. So there's really this twofold effect here. Number one, to make sure that there's no strings attached that would make it undesirable for the town to accept the funds. And secondly, if we do accept the funds, to make sure that we have a record of the conditions under which we accepted them.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, you
Yes.
might point out that there is a slight modification in this article that the selectmen have chosen to add, that it does have to do with including the phrase "or encumber the town in any way."
Right, and that's
an addition this year.
right. So the first part of it would be, so long as they do not require matching funds or encumber the town in any way. And the second portion is the treasurer shall be notified of any grant applications, and a copy shall be kept on file in the treasurer's office. Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend, what is the word we're using here? Approving.
Approve.
Approving Article 16 as written, so signify. Thank you. Vote was unanimous, 5-0, and the motion carries. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to appropriate all the funds received from the state for snowmobile registrations to local snowmobile clubs for maintaining their snowmobile trails, on condition that those trails are to be open to the public for outdoor recreation purposes at no charge.
Recommend adoption of the article as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to recommend approving?
Adoption of the article as written.
Yeah. Well, what's the word that what we've been using here? Approving? Can we go with approving?
You like that better?
That's what you did for all the others.
Let's go with consistency here.
Okay.
It may be a hobgoblin of little minds, but we'll go with it.
Okay. Works for me.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Tom and Holly, we're okay with approval? Thank you.
Yes.
As written, on the floor for discussion. This article has had some phraseology removed. It went through legal review in 2011 to result in what we've had the last several years. So essentially what we had is this additional phrase here, which has been deemed to be essentially useless because historically the selectmen have not actually entered into any agreements with clubs, and there's even some question as to whether we have a snowmobile club belonging to the town of Acton. Is that a reasonable statement?
Well, I think there's one, Mousom Valley or Acton Shapley or something like that, but the only way that they would come and try to get into an agreement with us is if the town owned property that they wanted to cross, and all we have is the town forest, right? So I don't think there's any land that they'd want to come across to, to be part of their trail system. So nobody's ever approached us to enter into any agreement, so it wasn't necessary for the town to give us permission to do that. If such time that it changes, then we can go back and ask the town at that time, but it's not needed now, so.
Okay, well, just understand that you're removing some flexibility here that you may choose to re-add at some point down the road.
Yeah, if it ever comes around, then the board at that time can go back and put it back on, but we don't need it, so.
I think it's well taken out. Because it's wide open the way it was written. Enter into agreements.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 17, as written, so signify. Thank you. 5-0, unanimous, motion carries. Article 18, yes, 18. To see if the town will vote to appropriate revenues received from MEMA, FEMA claims, I guess that would be MEMA, FEMA, claims during the fiscal year 2014 and fiscal year 2015 into an emergency disaster relief fund, a reserve fund. Said funds are to be utilized at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen during a declared event. Looking for a motion on this one. We can always amend the motion down the road.
Okay, then I will, to get it on the floor, I will make a motion that we adopt the article as written.
Do we have a second for approving the article as written?
I have a question on this article.
Yes, I do.
Can we get it on the floor for discussion?
Second.
I do too.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approving the article as written, and it's on the floor. Tom, you made the motion, you have the floor.
Okay. I have a serious question with respect to said funds are to be utilized at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen during a declared event. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that these funds may be appropriated and used, or do the selectmen have an answer for that?
It has to be, it can only be used when there's an emergency disaster, or FEMA has come in and said, we have a disaster. Now, some of the disasters we've had, the fire department had to go out and made a lot of money from FEMA. Other disasters, like last year, for the first time, we actually got paid for snow removal, so that came out of the road commissioners. So if we have a disaster, just because the money came from last year's road commissioners or last year's fire, and we've got a fire this year, or we got road commissioners this year, it allows us to put the money, we don't have to hold it for the fire department, or we don't have to hold it for the road commissioners. We hold it for emergencies.
But it came out of their budgets. If it comes out of the road commissioner's budgets.
Right, but their budgets end at the end of the fiscal year, and this money doesn't come in until a year later.
Their budgets roll over, don't they?
It is proposed that they roll over, and that's what I'm going to point
not
out
everything.
here.
Not everything rolls over, but
Well, the operating budgets do. The winter maintenance and summer maintenance roll over.
Right.
well, we can't put it back into those budgets. We'll use it for the next emergency, whoever needs it.
But if it's taken out of the road commissioner's budgets, then there's nothing on here that says roads. And when we get FEMA money, I heard you just say it's been from the fire department also?
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean,
Yep.
just feel
There's an
like-
article in there where we've already done, where we can pay the firefighters after 8 hours. That's also to emergency, that's the only time that would happen, is if FEMA came in and they had to work for 8 hours. So we've had a couple of years ago where it was the fire department that brought all the money in. Then last year, it was the fire department and the road commissioners brought the money in. We're just gonna use the money for an emergency. We're not gonna say, okay, it's gonna go to this department or that department. It's FEMA money, we're gonna get it back in so that we're not using the road commissioner's money or the fire department's money that year. We're not gonna say that it's gonna be, okay, the road commissioner paid out $10,000 last year out of their budget, and now we've got an emergency. If they don't spend $10,000, but the fire department's in there, we're gonna use the FEMA money there so we can get back to the point where we're not using their budgets eventually, because we don't have that many disasters, and if the money can build up, then we'll have that in there, so.
Mr. Chairman, I continue to have a reservation about this because I think it's totally unclear the way the article is written, what the intent is, and I understand the intent of the selectmen here, but I don't think that's clear to the body. I don't think it's, I just don't think it's clear, and I don't see how, without the term appropriate, that the selectmen could possibly do anything with this money, and in fact, they have $15,000 which they can spend in an emergency, and they can also come back to the town and ask to expend funds that they receive. On that rationale, I will amend...
Before you make an amendment, can we get a little bit more discussion in? I've got a few points I'd like to make, and the word appropriate is here.
During a declared event.
So we'd be appropriating them into the emergency disaster fund. So once it's in that emergency disaster fund, presumably it is fully appropriated and could be used.
During a declared
and
event.
Understood that we don't have a specificity here for what that declared event is, but we don't know what that event is going to be. What I'd like to point out here, or at least discuss, and you mentioned it, that, this other article that we've talked about already, Article 17. So my question is, how does this relate to Article 7, which compensates from the undesignated fund balance during national disaster or state of emergency? Next year, will Article 7 prefer to use the emergency disaster reserve fund source with the, undesignated fund balance as secondary, or, what's the vision here in future years?
Because we have money in that account now, if we were to have a disaster or a declared event by MEMA or FEMA, we would use that money first. If we needed more than that, then we would go into the undesignated fund from Article 7.
And is it in intent that once that fund exists, that Article 7 would make reference to that fund, that would be the preferred fund source? Because if not, there's really, I grant you that Article 18 would theoretically authorize the selectmen to use it without the additional authorization of Article 7. But I guess my question is, how do I draw a line around, say, I'll go with Tom Cashin's Venn diagram thing. Okay, so if I have MEMA, FEMA events, which Article 18 is talking about, and we have national disaster or state of emergency, as Article 7 is talking about, I assume that the Venn diagram there will have a certain amount of overlap, but not necessarily. There may be events that Article 7 and 18 would apply to, or either one.
Well, we've never had a MEMA FEMA fund before.
Right, but we're talking about MEMA FEMA events.
Right.
Right?
But this article that you were talking about now, we've never had that before because we never had that money. Whenever we got reimbursed, which is always a year after the event, that money went into the undesignated fund. So that's why you had the old article asking from the old undesignated fund.
Right.
Excuse me. Now, we're trying to separate it so we can use this money first before going into the road commissioner's money or into the fire department's money. So a new article, so maybe we do have to look at how it fits with the old Article 17, old Article 7, because that one was in there.
Well, yeah, but so is it your intent that Article 18 really talk about the same stuff as Article 7, except we have another fund source for that? And I understand that, I mean, the issue that we're trying to get around here is the timing delay between when the expense is incurred and when the recompense ultimately occurs. It could be months, and certainly it could be a different fiscal year.
It's always a year, yeah, it's always a year.
It's going to be a different fiscal year, which creates budgetary issues, and that's why, there's this intent to have a buffer, if you will, that prevents individual departments from having their budgets impacted. So a noble goal, I think, but my question here for 7 and 18 is it the intent that Article 18 cover or affect the same events that Article 7 is talking about? And if so, why the different phraseology?
How about
Can we go back and see how far back Article 7 is? Because this is just brand new this year, right?
Nope.
This, maybe last year. Because we've only had...
Yeah, but this Article 7 makes no reference of MEMA FEMA. It just talks about national disaster or state of emergency.
Right, but the MEMA FEMA started when? This year or last year?
This year.
This year, okay. So this is our first time actually having money in that account.
Right.
So we're adding it in to use that first was our intent. If we're not getting that, if the way the articles are written, that's not our intent, and we do have to fix it.
Mr. Chairman, there's another timing issue here. the last line of this article goes to a declared event, and we're presuming that that's a FEMA declared event. But the reality is that FEMA doesn't declare the event until the event is established by FEMA, which could be several days or weeks after an emergency.
Right.
While the event is in fact occurring, FEMA hasn't established whether it's a FEMA event.
Right, but we don't want to use the money for a snowstorm if FEMA's not going to come in and reimburse us. So this money stays in there unless FEMA say that it's a declared event.
But you don't know that till the snowstorm's all over.
Well, if it's a long enough emergency and they declare it, then we'll be able to spend the money, but,
So
we cannot use FEMA money for a bad snowstorm if they're not going to come in and tell us we have to go the way that we've always gone. We have to use the budget, and then when that's gone, we have to use the 15% over. So this is just for a FEMA declared event. That's all we're going to use that money for, because that's where it came from.
My thought was...
Or we could just leave that article out, leave the FEMA back in the undesignated fund, and leave Article 7 in the way it was. We're just trying to use that money where it should be used.
The thing is, there's no provision for FEMA period right now. I mean, what we're talking, the phraseology we're using right now is national disaster or state of emergency. So I guess a germane question based on what I just heard as far as FEMA maybe not declaring for several days or a week or what have you after the fact, would the knowledge of national disaster or state of emergency in all likelihood come before a FEMA declared event declaration?
the event would be occurring, and it can take FEMA up to a month to decide it's an event.
Yeah, because this is talking about exceeding 8 hours in duration, so presumably in order to even invoke Article 7, we know that it's a national disaster or state of emergency. My impression is that 18 and 7 are supposed to dovetail. My impression. Is that true or is that not true?
Well, we want to use the FEMA money first and then go into undesignated fund second, so yeah.
I think one of the other things is, though, the Article 7 is strictly for fire and rescue,
Right.
where Article 18 makes the money available to, say, the road commissioners.
That is true.
You're right, and
You know,
the
and that was
firefighters
more
don't
of our
get
intent,
paid.
I think, of that money. I mean, this year being over quite a bit on the budget, the money couldn't get its way back into the road commissioners where they needed it with the events we had. So this Article 18 would help
Well,
divert that money back
Still
over.
wouldn't have this year, because we didn't have a FEMA event this year, did we?
Yeah, we had a snowstorm.
We had one.
Had one big snowstorm.
Was it declared a FEMA
Yes.
event?
Well, what you're trying to do is reimburse the,
Yeah,
We already got that money.
no, there was one this year. I can't remember the name of the storm, it's the first time they ever named a snowstorm.
No, that was in 2012, 2013 fiscal year, because we've already
Are you
got that
sure?
money. Yeah, we've already
Yeah,
got
I
that
don't
money.
think there
That's
was
what we're
one.
putting in here. That's what
So-
we're putting in here.
Okay.
well, what you're trying to do
Either way,
is,
yeah,
is reimburse the department that incurs the expense. So why don't you
That's what I agree with.
put something like,
reimbursing the
said
department.
funds are to be utilized to reimburse the town department incurring an expense during a declared event, or declaring the expense during a declared event. That's what you want to do with it.
Wouldn't that be more simple?
What we want to do with it is use it first for an emergency before
But
we
you're
use any other
still
funds.
reimbursing the department for the expenses that, I mean, you're not going to have them spend it from this fund before you pay their regular.
Well, let's see if we can,
Payroll,
I think we're on a roll here with
I mean, I think it's
possible
better than
motions.
going back
motions to
into
that
the
event.
general fund. I think that's, I see that you're trying to help out when there is emergencies. I get that. I don't know, I just feel like it's very vague.
the general fund doesn't get its way back into.
I know it
like,
doesn't.
You know,
I
Well, if the
understand that.
department needs the funds, so
Right.
the money comes from the general fund if you go to the town or something.
So is there a way that we can sort of meet in the middle here on that last sentence, which is,
Well, you guys can make any recommendation
Fairly
you want.
vague.
We're not voting tonight, so
well,
whatever you guys,
understood.
like you
but-
did on the other one,
But we
you guys
want
can
to,
make a
we
recommendation.
want to
on.
make it rational for town floor to have a viable, acceptable option to go. And I think, Nancy, you might have been on a roll there with talking about reimbursing
The department.
specific department that incurred an
expense.
expense. So let's see if we can come up with a phrase, and then we can go with an amendment to the motion, and then move forward. Do you have a particular golden phrase you'd like to shoot for?
Well, mine was, said funds are to be utilized to reimburse the town department incurring, I don't know, I had an expense during a declared event, or incurring
Emergency disaster.
necessary expense, I don't know.
Okay, let me.
Some kind of expense during a declared event.
So is it thought that that this would be occurring retroactively, that there would be an expense to a department?
Right.
And we would be
Yeah,
reimbursing, we're not coming up front with this.
You're reimbursing the
Because that
expense.
declaration may be after the fact.
Right.
But it's going to be certainly ahead of when FEMA is going to come up with reimbursement. Okay, so said funds are to be utilized to reimburse.
Right. The town department, because it may not necessarily be public safety. Well, no, it is public safety,
To
really.
reimburse.
Are the roads in with public safety?
When it's FEMA, it would be either the roads or it'd be the
fire.
fire department.
Yeah. Public, or you could put down the public safety department incurring,
Reimburse the expense incurring department? Or is that a little too flowery? Is
Little
there
too
another way to say
flowery.
that?
keep it simple.
I'm asking you how to do that.
Okay, to reimburse
The,
I don't know, public safety department.
yeah, but now you're a little
Is
too
that
specific,
roads
maybe?
as well? Roads and fire.
Who knows what department is going to incur an expense? I mean,
Well, it's gonna be-
we could have, I mean,
It's not gonna be the historical committee.
presumably not, but we don't know necessarily. Do you want to get that specific?
Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
that's what FEMA's gonna reimburse. They're not gonna reimburse anybody else, I don't think.
Right. Mr. Gore?
I'd like to point out that the duration of time for FEMA to reimburse is usually, as has been pointed out several times tonight, a year, and the authority of the town meeting or the vote of the town meeting lasts for the duration of the fiscal year only. So any motion that we pass with
That's true.
respect to this, the disposition of these funds is applicable only until the end of the year. My suggestion is this article is not ready for prime time, and if we are going to do what the selectmen intend, I think either we need some sort of designated fund or we need an ordinance to move forward with that, okay? That's my own opinion. And having stated that, is everybody clear with respect to what I've said?
Yep,
And do you agree?
yep.
Okay. I'm
I
going
know
to
what you're
amend
saying.
my motion on this article to recommend that the town meeting not adopt the article as written and request the selectmen to give that some thought. I think we understand your intent, and I think it's a good idea.
Once you vote, we can't change you
I
guys are making
I understand that, we've made the recommendation. I'm
The
just-
articles stand as they are, right, as of tonight.
I
So this is
understand.
This is going on the floor.
Understood.
I understand that.
Okay,
I
so
understand that.
just, yeah,
I'm
make
just
your
expressing
recommendation.
the fact that, that I'm not really comfortable with this. I don't think it's ready to go to the floor of the town meeting.
All right, so can we go with an official, an amendment to the original motion? Let's do that.
Want a
Or
second?
you could withdraw your.
Because this
motion.
this actually
Person
falls-
withdraws
Yeah.
the second.
This actually falls directly into what I was talking about earlier. We don't want to
Okay.
recommend that it go and then,
I'll withdraw my
going
motion.
negative. So,
Then
no,
rewrite.
what I'm saying is, so you want to withdraw your original motion?
I'll withdraw my original
Yeah,
motion. I'll withdraw
rather
my-
than recommended rewriting it, if you don't approve it.
No, I'm not
No,
recommending
we're not
rewriting it.
doing that at all.
I understand you can't.
And
No,
who
I'm
was the
saying in the
second?
future, we need to give this some thought.
So, okay, so let's bend a couple of steel bars here, and
I will
we'll
place
take,
another motion
we'll
on the
take the
floor.
original motion off the floor, and we're ready for a second.
Okay. I will make a motion that we recommend that the town meeting not adopt the article.
So ought not to pass.
Ought not to pass, right?
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second to recommend ought not to pass. On the floor, do you have any further comments, Mr. Gore?
None.
I think we all understand that there's an admirable purpose behind this, but I think that it does need a little bit more thought. So I tend to agree with the motion as it currently stands.
Just one thing, though.
Yeah.
If it doesn't pass, FEMA monies go back into undesignated fund, and we won't have them to use should there be an emergency this year, just so everybody's clear on that. It'll go back to the old way.
I think that's understood.
Okay.
So obviously, this can come back to bite.
We're only talking about $13,000 right now, so. I think, I don't know how much was left from last year, whether we got any from the year before.
But, you know, there's
Got $13,000
kind of an important point here, and I guess it might even apply to good old number 7, that, you know, we don't have an ordinance here. This does not encumber the next fiscal year or the following fiscal year. So what has happened with Article 7, and obviously it's been a different article number in prior years, but have we gotten burned by the fiscal year rollover?
No, we carry.
Previously? Or because we're always, you know.
This is more because the firefighters don't get paid if there's a national emergency or a MEMA, a state emergency, and they're out there for 8, 10, 12 hours, they don't get paid. So this was more to make sure that they do get paid, because there's no money in their budget to pay them. So this way, if they're gonna be out there, you know, protecting us, then they will get an hourly rate for that time they're out there.
Plus, this guy, if it goes through town meeting, and here I'm talking about Article 7, every year, it has the effect of an ordinance. As long as the town puts it through every year, it's in effect.
Yeah.
You know, so something can happen in one fiscal year, and the other side of it happened during the different fiscal year, because this article is in effect each
Now,
time.
can the
Same thing with
selectmen-
18.
Can the selectmen declare a state of emergency if it's something very local?
Yes,
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
but it's unclear in this article what the
Yeah, right.
criteria for a declaration are.
Yeah.
That's another problem.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to see when
Your old job.
Ted,
Yeah, hang on just a second. Would have to be our emergency manager, right? To call an
I don't think
emergency for the
so.
town?
Maybe Tom can weigh in. The EMA director, he can't declare an emergency, correct?
No.
It would have to come from the selectmen.
In spite of the name, director,
Yeah.
it is very frustrating because the director has no authority at all to do anything, in spite of the oppression that people have.
What were you asking, Hon? I'm
what I was
sorry.
gonna say is, I mean, I think that you guys are on the right road here with trying to keep it so that it doesn't affect the budgets, the regular, everyday budget. So I agree with that. I would, in a perfect world, I'd like to see when it comes out of a certain budget that it goes back to that budget. But I get what you're also saying about time-wise and how it takes so long to get back. I mean, you could have, let's say with the roads, you could have one road commissioner, you know, to have it out of his budget, and if we have a year that there's an election and it changes over, then it goes back into a different road commissioner's budget, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I get that time is an issue, but, so I have mixed feelings about it, because I think you guys are on the right track of trying to help the normal, everyday budgets, so that they're not being depleted from an emergency, because I've seen that, I mean, Scott's been for a while here, so I've seen that happen, you know, over the years, but I don't
I think
know.
most of the intent we had with this was directed more towards the road commissioners,
Well, and if,
because of the sand salt.
Right, so it doesn't affect the
amount of money
everyday
we spent
thing.
this year, so.
well, that's why we
And it
increased
does,
this,
yeah,
so.
yeah.
And
But,
it, I mean, you know, I looked at it, it looked vague to me, I'm like, what's, you know, but, I mean, after listening to the conversation and how, I would like to see it go back into the specific budget that it came from. If we can't do that because of time restraints, then I guess this would, to me, be the next best thing, I guess.
yeah, and the thought here is, okay, we got our first time that we got paid for snow last year, right? And so if that happens again, that'd be great, then it'll go to the road commissioners. But if they didn't pay for snow, then the road commissioners wouldn't have gotten any of that $13,000. The fire department was out a lot for, calls and the ambulance and stuff like that, so a lot of the money came from them. If it was an emergency where it was a fire, we've had a lot of grass fires this spring already, and if it was a fire, like they have it out in California and stuff like that, then we would want to use that money for the firefighters right away, even if it came from the road commissioners last year. That's our intent.
Well, an emergency in our town is an emergency.
Right, now, that's all our intent is. Whatever the emergency is, when the money's in the bank, let us use that money for that emergency, and eventually it's going to catch up.
So I think I am going to vote differently, because I do feel like if we can't put it back into then this is the next best route.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is, if it does pass and we don't have a national emergency again, hopefully, then that 13,000 stays there, then we get any money next year. No, we didn't have one this year, so we won't get any money next year. So the 13,000 will still be there if the town, decides that they don't want this to pass as it is, then we'll have to rewrite it for next year and come up with a better way to put it before the town.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment here. I think there's an alternate way to approach this that really would go more to the heart of addressing the concerns that Holly has and all of us feel, and that would be some wording, and I realize this can't be done for this town meeting, that would authorize the appropriation of funds spent during an emergency from the unappropriated surplus when a declaration is made, a FEMA declaration is made. The declaration normally is made within a week to a month of an event. And what I'm suggesting is that perhaps an article that authorized the appropriation of whatever the established cost of the event is automatically can be appropriated and restored to the funds from which the emergency funds were spent. Now, I don't have a solution to this, and I haven't thought it through, but that is a different way to approach this, and it moves the money more quickly to the officers of the town that are affected by the event.
The problem is we don't know what we're going to get from FEMA, and we spent a lot more than $13,000 in that storm last year. That's just what they approved for us. They approved certain hours for the fire department, certain hours for the road commissioner. One day of a 3 or 4 day storm was considered the day that we got paid for plowing.
Right.
So we can't just say, okay, they declared this an event, so you work 4 days plowing, we're going to take it out of the undesignated fund and give you. We're just talking about the money that we get from FEMA going back into using for the next emergency, so that they don't have to use that year's plowing or that year's fire budget, is what we're trying to do. But we can't, until we get the money, we don't know who gets it, because each department has to apply for it too.
I understand that.
Michelle goes with the road commissioners and the fire chief to a meeting, usually in Alfred, and then they all put in paperwork, and you don't know what you're going to get until the year after. So the only thing that we can give back is whatever they got approved for. But we can't be saying that we're going to take it out of the undesignated fund and reimburse them just because FEMA says it's an emergency, because we may not be part of that emergency. So we're just trying. We can work on it some more.
Okay, to perhaps avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, because I think we all agree that this is a noble goal, I've thrown some words together, and basically my quibble is with that last sentence.
Yeah.
So how does this sound? Said funds, as available, are to be utilized to reimburse the incurring department during a declared FEMA event. The idea being the funds come from FEMA claims, they should go back to reimburse FEMA claims, and we may not have enough available to do that, and they go back to the department. So it's basically taking it a little less of the discretion of the Board of Selectmen. It makes it a little more definitive what we do to it. We target it to FEMA claims, so we're being very clear that we're talking about trying to make this a buffer for these FEMA funds. It's sourced from FEMA, it goes out to FEMA claims, and if it's not available, the department's going to suck it up as they do now.
Right,
You know,
but you
there's no undesignated funds.
You cannot rewrite articles tonight, so all you can do is you can, like you did on the earlier one, you can make a recommendation to take out an advice.
I absolutely understand that.
Okay, I thought you were trying to put this in tonight. Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to
You
figure
were
out.
scaring me, Paul.
I'm just trying to figure out if we can make an alternate motion to saying, go suck eggs, try next year. Because I think there's a good reason for having this if we can save it. We may not be able to, but I just throw that on the table for discussion. Is that something that's more acceptable than the sentence that's there now, or sufficiently acceptable to recommend, or just forget it and go with?
Can you read that again, Paul?
Sure. Said funds are to be utilized, said funds as available are to be utilized to reimburse the incurring department during a declared MEMA-FEMA event. Or even for a declared MEMA-FEMA event.
It would have to be 4 because you don't get the declaration.
Okay, so so it might be slightly after, but for a declared MEMA-FEMA event. So we're stating that the declaration is from MEMA-FEMA. It's not, we're not talking about national emergency or anything if in fact they're not coinciding. So this is strictly for MEMA-FEMA stuff. It could be any department that has to make a MEMA-FEMA claim. We're sending the money back if we have it. The money would have come in from a prior claim. We keep it on hand for future claims. And if it's available and we have it, they can have it back. And if not, they have to eat the expense. And when the actual claim is paid by MEMA-FEMA, those funds go back into that account. Now, I guess the only missing piece might be if they're able to get the remainder, say, like we didn't have enough at the time, but maybe later on we can give it back, but I don't think that's necessarily germane here. In other words, they'll eat it. If we don't have it, they'll eat it. That's it.
I think it might be germane.
Yes? Because they're going to eat it unconditionally if we don't do this article anyway.
Did you mention claim in your revised sentence?
Said funds are to be utilized to reimburse the incurring department for a declared MEMA-FEMA event. So the intent here, okay, so to reimburse.
But Ted was just saying that they may have expenses, but
to reimburse the incurring department's claim. And again, we're just talking about a recommendation.
Right, yeah, we don't get reimbursed for everything.
Right.
We put in for everything we can after going to that meeting, but then then FEMA decides what we're actually going to get.
Yeah, right.
So we don't know. So we could actually be reimbursing for something that is never actually going to be paid back.
That's correct. That's
right.
Correct. That's why this needs
right.
Okay, so.
That's why we're trying to do it after the fact, so
Yeah.
we use the money for the next storm, and trying to keep the
So
money
maybe
separate.
a forlorn effort here.
Although I have one question. If memory serves me correctly, you get noticed of what you're going to get reimbursed before the reimbursement comes.
Yeah, but it's not,
Yeah.
you know. it's
Several
not-
months. It's several months after, right?
No, because they don't have the meeting until several months after.
No, we always had meetings within 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks.
I
Sorry, okay.
I haven't seen that happen.
Okay.
I mean, after discussing all this, I don't know, maybe this is just the best way of doing it. And then, like Ted said, there could be any emergency, it could be a grass fire, and you'd want for the fire department to be able to use the funds. I just think that, I'm sure that when you guys decide to use these funds, whoever it's affecting, you would have discussion with them on it.
Whoever's doing the work at that storm is gonna get the money, yeah. We're playing catch-up, but I think eventually, over time, if this stays in here, eventually it's gonna catch up that everybody's gonna, get at least what FEMA reimbursed their department for.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is it's all tax dollars. It's just, we're trying to use some of the federal money to offset the tax dollars, the town tax dollars that we're paying, and use it in the right way is all we're trying to do.
I think we understand your intent. I think it's honorable, but
Any further discussion? Okay, so the motion on the floor is ought not to pass, to recommend ought not to pass, with reservations, but that's the recommendation.
I don't know either.
So,
I'm in favor.
All in favor of the motion, ought not to pass, so signify. Okay, I'm gonna go with that, ought not to pass. All opposed, so signify. Okay, thank you.
What's your vote, Paul?
So, we're going with recommending, and in fact,
He voted with...
okay, so in fact, because 3 voted in the negative, we've got one of those lovely cases that I was talking about earlier, that we're voting down a negative. So I would respectfully request that we get a motion in the affirmative, and we vote 3-2, and then we have our 3-2 to talk about on town floor, and we're not confusing the heck out of the situation, of an already confusing situation.
Good point.
By voting down a negative.
Good point.
Okay? So can we get a positive motion here?
I will withdraw my second motion.
We're going to re-withdraw. So can we have a motion, please?
I will make a motion that the article ought not to pass.
That was your previous motion. Can we have a positive motion, please?
Article should pass, approved as written.
And then you can vote it down, and I can vote it down, and they can vote it up, and then we still have our 3-2, and we still have our discussion on town floor, but we're missing about 4% of confusion.
I think ought not to pass is quite clear, but...
Yeah, but it was voted down, is the point.
Okay, I see, yes, you're correct.
Okay?
Yes, thank you for that.
So though I was straining to come up with an example earlier in the meeting, we have the perfect one here.
All right, I withdraw that motion.
May I have a positive motion?
I will make a motion recommending the article as written, and we will.
And since you're going to vote that down, may I have one of our 3 folks who intend to vote for it make the motion?
Recommend that, recommend approval of the article.
Do we have a second?
That was a second.
Because he did say that.
That's what I did say.
Well, I know, but he's intending to vote against it, so
okay.
it's not a good idea to vote against your own motion. In fact, you shouldn't do it.
So Nancy said it, I seconded it.
So, Nancy was the motion, and who was the second, please?
Holly.
Holly, thank you. Okay, so, the motion on the floor is to approve Article 18 as written. All in favor of approving as written, so signify. Okay, so we have Holly, Nancy, Joan. All opposed? Thank you.
Does that make you happy?
It does. It makes me giddy.
Is there 2 opposed? Was it you
We
two,
have
Paul?
2 opposed, we have 3 for, the majority carries, the motion carries. We are recommending, though grudgingly, approval of Article 18 as written.
That was not my intent,
And now
however.
Understood, but we have a rousing discussion on town floor. Okay. Having burned way more time than I wanted to, let's move on. Oh, and we'll probably come to another screeching halt, but Article 19, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $13,824 for a deputy code enforcement officer position, Department 102-15.
Move approval of the article as written,
Second.
or recommend approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 19 as written. On the floor for discussion, Nancy, you made the motion. It's yours if you want it. Or not.
Wait a minute.
And I'll also point out that this is the first of the monetary articles. Not everyone here was present for all the workshops, so I will entertain hopefully a minor amount of discussion as necessary as we go through this. I certainly want you to understand what you're voting for or against. But again, I would like to keep it to a minimum if we can. So if there's a, Holly, got a?
No, I understand what I'm voting for.
Okay.
We had talked about that at the workshop with Kenny.
I have a question, Paul.
So 102.15 is what we're talking about here.
Squeak up.
Paul?
Yes.
I have a question.
Feel free.
I unfortunately couldn't be at that meeting. Consequently, I would like to know how many hours does the code enforcement officer spend at planning board?
Well, it depends on the issue, 2 to 4. I think probably 4 is the latest. I don't know. I don't go to the planning board meetings. 2 to 4 hours every other week. His job has been set up long before I came for 25 hours a week. And we're getting a lot of complaints lately that because of the new zoning with the resource protection, that's where he's spending most of his time right now, is just in resource protection, all the new zoning that we did. Because there's a lot of folks that are tearing down their own camps and building brand new, bigger camps, so he's spending a lot of time there. So he brought this up to us last year, and we decided not to put it on, because at the same time, the planning board was also looking towards bringing us more zoning last year. The rain garden thing, what's
And you may still see that in all likelihood in the fall, but not, obviously not for this town meeting.
So he asked for it last year, so we said no, but this year, we are getting complaints about zoning not being enforced, and Kenny just doesn't have the time. And so he's asked for his deputy to come on for 10 hours a week for the year. Now, what will end up being probably is he won't need him December, January, February, but in the summertime, he's going to need them more. There's things like people have gotten permits to cut trees on the lake, and they're supposed to replant, and they used to go out in the boat and go around, make sure all that kind of stuff was done. And so we're not enforcing those things, so that's why he's asking for this position, and we're going to leave it up to the town to decide whether they want to go from 25 to 35 hours for code enforcement and add an additional 13,000. Now, because it's 10 hours, there are no benefits involved. No medical or anything else, it's just a rate of was it $20 an hour?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's $20 an hour. And he already is our deputy, so we don't have to advertise or anything else. Right now, we have a little bit in the budget where when Kenny was on vacation, that he would sit in so that builders could continue doing what they were doing while Kenny was gone, so. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Feel free.
Okay, I'd just like, if memory serves me correctly, it's my understanding that this department is self-supporting. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
You mean for fees?
Yes, through fees, self-supporting. Is that correct?
Well, the actual money that comes in, yes, is more than that budget, but we have to give most of that to the state. You know, the state gets the electrical permits, the plumbing permits, and the septic system permits. We have to give fees to the state. I mean, we collect some of those fees, but we don't get everything that you see that comes into his
Plumbing and
department.
electrical fees go.
I'm sorry?
Portions of the plumbing and electrical fees go to the state.
Yeah.
Building permit fees don't go to the
Yeah.
state.
So, as far as him actually bringing in enough money to pay for the whole department, I don't think so. I asked about that the other day and was told that most of that money goes to the state. So, I mean, we do have certain parts of it that go to us, but let me see if it's here.
I don't think it's most of it.
I thought we were told quite a bit of it stays.
So you're going to look at 19
Michelle just
and
told me the
20.
other day that or Jennifer, one of them told me that a lot of it goes to the state. It's kind of like with registrations,
Oh, yeah.
you know, you get certain parts of the registrations. We get to keep the excise tax from all the registrations, and the rest goes to the state. The same thing with plumbing, I mean, with the code enforcement. The state gets a certain amount of every one of the fees that we put in. Like the electrical fee, any electrical permit, that's not the town because Kenny's not an electrical inspector, the state does that. So all that money goes to the state, even though we don't have a state inspector in town.
I did have it. I don't have it with me.
That's the thing that we got that basically showed what happens with the additional, oh yeah, revenues to offset taxes. So building permits, $30,000, 1314 estimated. Plumbing permits, 5,000. I guess that would be it. So, 30 and 5, so $35,000 roughly. It appears that would be coming to the town that don't get passed along. 35,000 compared to, what the heck is in our next article there? Code enforcement, oh yeah, well, let's just briefly go to that article. So we've got CEO, code enforcement, yeah, so 35, so roughly half the budget is compensated from fees.
Yeah, the 75 is for Kenny and for his assistant.
Right. But that's, you know, essentially that's double what the, at least as far as this paperwork is concerned.
Right, and then we're adding,
Fees are.
now, he believes by adding this person on to do enforcement, then fines will increase the amount of money coming in, because we are not, you know, we're not putting any fines out for people right now, because he just doesn't have the time to get the fine out there and then go after it and chase it down. This gentleman that's coming in, that's what he's gonna do. So there will be more money. I think what he probably said, and probably what we misunderstood, was there'll be enough money coming in from this gentleman, what he's going to do, to pay for the new guy, not pay for the whole department.
So, and to clarify on that point, or expound on that point, you know, right now, and this is not predicated on, you know, any new zoning that we've had in the past or we're gonna have in the future. Right now, we're not quite being able to do what we should be doing in the CEO's office, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, he said to make priorities, and right now, all the building in the resource protection and shorefront is what's taking his time.
So the $10 an hour is, you know, roughly per week. The job is that if there's essentially being cherry-picked, you know, best bang for the buck, I presume, that this person will go after, you know, the biggest
the biggest issues, yep.
with possibly the best income for the town, and go from there.
Well, I would prefer the people would listen to him the first time he comes in and not have to find them, then the issue goes away, but
and presumably there are other
high hopes for that.
Presumably there are other elements other than just issuing fines that you know, of things that perhaps aren't being done the way they should be done, you know, quite possibly.
Well, it's mostly enforcement that Kenny said, you know, he's enforcing the buildings that are going up, but he's not able to enforce a lot of the other things that are in the zoning, you know, that have nothing to do with new buildings.
Land use ordinance.
Yeah, you know, property with, you know, too much stuff on it, trash, neighbors complaining, vacant houses with complaints to our sheriff, and, you know, things like that. And again, the trees, to make sure that if you cut a big tree down at the lake and you're supposed to, you know, you get a permit, you're supposed to put a new tree in. If they're not doing that, then, you know, that's pretty serious stuff, so.
The other thing the board may consider is, my understanding is the permit fees in the town haven't been revised in a number of years, and they.
Yeah, we went up last year, right? Yeah, we went up last year. Yep. Right. Kenny came up to us and asked us, and we went up last year.
Maybe I'm thinking of a discussion I had last year.
Okay, are we?
Yeah, all he had to do was come and ask us and tell us that, and we raised them last year.
Okay.
Do we have further discussion? Are we ready to go?
Ready to go.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend approval of Article 19 as written. All in favor, so signify. Okay, so we do have 5, okay, thank you. Unanimous, as soon as I can find my warrant again, which I managed to lose. Here we go. Article 19. Unanimous, the motion carries. Article 20. So here we have general government, and we essentially see that you know, we've gone up 1.2%, 11.6%, 0.7%. So this year, as written, would be going up 0.7%. And that's straight budget. Down below, we're going to be also incorporating things that happened during special town meetings, but for this particular item, what we really have is just the straight general government plus the CEO Article 19. So normally, this will actually be folded into general government, and in fact, that's what you'll see next year. So if you were to include both of these numbers, we would be talking about a budget increase of 2.8% over last year. because of the fact that this really belongs in general government, but it's been separate, just to keep things simpler.
Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion recommending the adoption of the article as written, and I reserve the right to make a comment.
What I'd like to do first is just go over it quickly. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to raise $674,460 and appropriate $676,460 for general government. Department 102 to be expended as follows. I will not read the numbers. They are here. And as stated, they're going up like just a little bit. $2,000 variance to be funded from APAT funds for related work within office manager's position. And I will now accept a motion.
Oh, you're still waiting for me?
I'm waiting for a motion.
A motion? Oh, I thought I made it already. It wasn't seconded, though. I will recommend adoption of the article as written.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Holly? Thank you. Okay, on the floor, Mr. Gore.
My only comment is that 102-5 includes the contract with the sheriff's office, and as I have previously mentioned, I would prefer myself to see this included in Article 22, Public Safety, as opposed to municipal management. I don't think the police officer is a management position, and so that's advisory. I am not going to oppose the article simply based on that comment, but I would wish that you folks give that consideration in the future, or explain to me why it's not there.
I believe it because it's still under grants. It's under a completely different thing right now. That's why it has its own department, because it's a grant, and we're in contract with Shapley and the department. If the town votes to keep him after the end of the 4 years, then he could go into that department. But right now, it's a special line item where we have to get him, keep him separate because it is a grant. It's a 4-year grant, 3 years that they pay for half, and then the 4th year we have to pay half and half with Shapley. So that's why we've kept it as its own department under the general government.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. Like I said, Ted, I just think that, and I don't know that it being a grant means it needs to be treated any differently with respect to the warrant.
Yeah, she was keeping grants and loans and everything in each of their own departments, and then keeping them under general government. So I don't know if that was an
auditor's. It's a matter of how she's done it, in other words.
I don't know if that was an auditor's recommendation or why she did it, but that's the way we've done it since we signed the contract. So if the town were to vote for him to become our deputy from then on after the 4 years, then yeah, we could put him into the same department as the fire department.
Are we on our 3rd year with him?
No, we just made 1 year in January.
So, for some reason.
So only a year and a half. Yep, so we got 2 more years, or a year and a half more as only paying $20,000. Well, actually it went up a little this year because they renegotiated the contracts with the deputies, and we have to make the difference in his hourly rate. So kind of like the school budget, the school does negotiations, the teachers' raises go up. Same thing with the sheriff deputies, they're all union, so he got a raise. I think it's gone up like $3,000 this year. So.
Yeah, year 2 of 4 is what we're in right now.
Do we have any data with that, Ted, that shows if there's been a difference with crime or anything like that in our town since we've had him?
We can get that, and I can tell you from the 2 public hearings we just had from the bars, just the trouble at the 2 bars has gone way down. I mean, there was nothing that gave me any concern from either bar compared to the year before, when we had, knife fights and somebody getting knocked over on a motorcycle or having an accident on a motorcycle, and then they pulled the motorcycle and refused the ambulance and threw the motorcycle in a truck and took off, and we're not seeing any of that anymore. And I know that they caught 9 people breaking into the houses over the summer between Shapley and Acton. Houses were on Peacock, and they are actually starting it on fire. and they caught the 3 people that did that. There was a guy that was building a house on a lake in Chapley, had left his tools on a Saturday, and Dan caught the thieves on Monday selling the tools at a pawn shop in Rochester. So he's done a really amazing job.
That's good.
He really has. And that doesn't even
smart.
talk about the stuff that he does within the community that nobody hears about, like, there was an ambulance call, he was the first one to respond and gave CPR. He picks up some of the folks in town to bring them to either the Owls Luncheon or the church luncheon. So there's a lot of things that people don't, and he doesn't like to say anything about it, but he's doing, I say yes, and I can get as far as crime, and how many caught stuff, I can get that from the sheriff's department.
Well, it's not just crime. I mean, you just described a lot of different things as kind of like just help to the community.
Yeah,
But I think that once the 4 years are up, I mean, it would be good data, because I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to say, okay, what was the difference? Just like me, I want to know, what's the difference?
Yeah.
So-
And I think Dan pretty much has done it for himself too, because anybody that's met him, even people that he stopped to give tickets to, is still like him. I haven't heard any complaints from
I met
anybody.
him I just met him just like.
Bring it on!
And I liked him as soon as I met him. I liked him too.
Yeah, no,
He's
very
personable.
great young man. I'm very impressed with him, and I'm glad we got him.
He also has prepared reports that have been, or lists of annually, I've seen a couple of them, lists of incidences that he responded to.
What we did is we called
Yeah,
up
that's
and,
true. He has to document all
we called up and got all the calls that went from each of the bars for the whole year since he's been on. And like I say, the calls were minor. Some are like traffic stops and stuff. If it happens near Iron Tails, then they use their address. If it happens near Willie's, then they, use that address. But I mean, compared to what was in there before, I mean, domestic violence and arguments and fights in the parking lot, and that was, a couple of years ago when we tried to pull a liquor license. But none of that's in there anymore. And they've also gone in, because they're working for the town now, they're allowed to go in and do investigation to make sure that they're not serving minors. When it was state police one month and sheriff the next month, they couldn't do that. It had to be the liquor commission, and you had one liquor investigator for all of York County. So it's kind of hard to think that they're going to be walking into one of our bars. And the other thing that they did right after they started was they did a rolling check in Acton. They had Berwick Cop, Biddeford Sheriff's Department. They got a federal grant. It was like 7 different towns, and our sheriff deputy came into Acton right on 109 as the bars were closing, and stopped every car that came down the road and caught several OUIs, several driving without a license, all that kind of stuff. And then the whole unit moved into Lebanon, then it moved into the next town, and they're probably going to be doing that again probably very shortly with Memorial Day coming up and the season starting again. The other thing that he stopped was there was a lot of problems down at Horn Pond at the dam.
Oh, yeah,
There was a lot of problems down there with drugs and alcohol and partying at night.
Yeah.
No more.
good.
No more. He goes in there all the time, and he has the authority. They put up a sign, that he can arrest. As soon as he walks in, somebody's got a beer, he can arrest now, because they put up a sign warning him. And before, they couldn't do any of that either. So Horn Pond Dam is really quieted down, so you can go put your boat in and go fishing now, and you don't have to be worried about the drug parties that were down there, so.
Any further discussion?
You still can't go swimming, but you can put your boat in.
They still swim there.
Fall out of your boat, Nancy.
Used to.
They're like a big tire roper or
Are
something.
we ready to wrap this one up?
Moving right along.
Well, that's the intent, yes. Any further discussion germane to this article? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 20 as written, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous, motion carries. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $10,108 for Health and Welfare, Department 103. This includes $108 for health officer stipend and $10,000 for general assistance.
Recommend approval of the article as written.
Second.
Okay, so who was first there?
Holly.
Ollie, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 21 as written on the floor. Nancy, it's yours if you want it. Okay, this article has essentially been, actually hasn't been flat. This is the one where we have general assistance that's been fairly high in 2011. Then it's been ramped down basically due to change procedures. And last couple years it's been $10,000 for general assistance. And we're retaining that this year. Essentially it's a flat budget for this particular item. And this does agree with what we talked about on March 29th. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 21 as written, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous, the motion carries. All right. Article 22, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $161,002 for Public Safety Department 104 to be expended as follows. Fire Department, $126,556, street lights, $1,700, animal control, $9,118, communications, $22,335, EMA Director, $1,293. Looking for a motion.
Motion to adopt the article as written.
We have second.
Second.
Paraphrasing slightly, we have a motion to, and second, to recommend approval of Article 22 as written. On the floor for discussion.
Well, as I've already said, I would like to see our SO contract in this article. Having said that, I think the other thing that will need to be discussed some is communications, just brought to the public's attention of what this is all about, and I'm sure our selectmen are up to doing that. So,
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that part of this article, it's sort of interesting that the previous one, when this happened, we actually talked about the additional one first, but now we're talking about it second. But essentially, the communications 22,335, if we look for last year, it's slightly higher than last year, and I believe there was a salary or stipend involved in that.
No, that's what we pay Sanford.
oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke then.
Yeah, that's what we pay Sanford for
References
communications.
Okay, so let's look at the 104.
And that's per capita.
Okay, so let's look at the 10430 just for giggles, since I managed to misstate the facts of the matter. Imagine that. 10430. So the dispatch and the EMA.
Right.
So the EMA lease is unchanged, and the dispatch that we pay, the fee has gone up slightly.
Yeah.
For 3%.
I apologize, I was thinking that the tower issue
Yeah,
was involved in
and in
that.
fact, next year, I mean, essentially, if we do this other article that we haven't even talked about yet, which is the Blueberry Hill Tower, and it is fairly germane to this article, at least it will be next year, so it's worth talking about briefly here. There's a $4,800 amount that would normally, or initially it was wrapped into this article, but it's been broken out separately for separate approval or denial, $4,800, and that essentially was broken out of this number. So this number is not as extreme as it might have been, but it's gone up slightly due to a 3% increase in the cost of what the service is in the town of Sanford.
The potential is illustrated in Article 23.
Yes. So this proves to the budget book of March 29th, and also relevant to this is fire department. There's a $10,800 purchase that we've done this for several years now, that as part of the fire department is a separate budget item, a separate warrant article for purchase of equipment, $10,800, and you will see that coming up. Any further discussion? Oh, actually, it's worth 1.9%. This is somewhat instructive. Last year, and we're talking about in 2013, let's see, fall of 2013, we had a special town meeting. for repairs to the fire truck engine 1, and that was $25,000. So I threw that in as being a part of last year's budget year, even though it occurred after town meeting. So for last year, that one expenditure increased last year's public safety funding by essentially from 17% from year over year. And then the SCBA article that was approved tacked on some additional funding, but since we're now counting the prior year's SCBA funding, it actually went down slightly, just in percentage. It's a numbers thing. So last year, we spent 16% more than the year before, is the bottom line, for this department, public safety. This year, the Blueberry Hill Tower lease, which is going to be the next thing coming up, is going to actually be spending, even with spending that, we're talking about 9% less than last year because of that 25% for the fire department last year. And if I haven't totally confused the heck out of you, we come down to the SCBA item again. So ultimately, all of the items for this year would be 8.9% less than all of the items for last year. But right now, we're just talking about this one item, which is 1.9% greater than last year. So, any further discussion for Article 22? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 22 as written, so signify. Thank you. I think we got 5 there. Unanimous, the motion carries. Article 23. There we go. Okay, hopefully we're not going to be stalled too long here, but you never know. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to allow the Board of Selectmen to negotiate a lease agreement with Darlene Ham for a portion of property at map 260 lot 014, which hosts the Blueberry Hill Communications Tower. Said lease shall not exceed a 10-year term, and payments on the lease shall not exceed $400 per month. A copy of the proposed agreement is on file in the town clerk's office. And I'm looking for a motion on that, and obviously we can amend as necessary, just to get it on the floor for discussion.
Move approval of the article as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 23 as written on the floor. Nancy, do you want to take that away or not? Okay, so the agreement is here. This is actually, this one came in.
Yeah, like today.
This one came in late today, late breaking news as of around 3 p.m. today. So I'm not going to read the whole darn thing, but I'm certainly going to scroll through it and see if I can find anything that raises red flags in my mind. Okay, so Darlene Ham, Blueberry Hill Farm, lessor, and we are lessee, and it hasn't actually even, oh, here we are, yeah. So Acton is lessee. We require a communications tower for fire department and other municipal agencies. Previously leased, commonly known, Blueberry Hill Communications Tower. Okay, so we had a previous lease agreement in 1993. Presumably that was a, what was that, a $0 or $1 a year, or what was that?
It was $1.
$1 a year.
Why did she suddenly own it?
So we've renegotiated.
But we owe him $20 because I don't think we ever paid him $1 a year.
So hopefully we'll take care of that the first year.
Is there a termination clause in this agreement?
There is.
I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to read this, so I'm a little...
That was just,
Well, there was a
the
termination.
termination clause was just put in today.
Beg your pardon?
It was just put in today by the attorney.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
The termination clause was.
Okay, so
I
we have
couldn't
a
see
lot.
having it without it.
10, paragraph 10.
Are we held harmless in the event of a termination? That's, I guess, my concern. In the event that we wish to terminate the agreement.
That was one of my
It was a
concerns.
60, we give them a 60-day notice, and that's the end of that.
Subject to early termination provisions of paragraph 4. So focus on paragraph 4 if that's your concern. We'll get there in a
That'll be a
second.
concern.
Let's see. So this has not actually been negotiated with the lessor yet.
Not fully.
Correct?
Not fully, no. She came to us and wanted some money for the tower. We batted back and forth a few different things. Tried to go for $200, tried to buy the land. She held pretty firm at $400. I've gotten Matt Bors from Waterboro Fire Department. He's the chief in Waterboro involved. I also had John Sylvester from Alfred Selectman's office involved because they're part of the 12-town group, and 9 out of the 12 towns use this. Effective in July, it'll be 8 out of the 12 towns. 8 out of the towns, because Alfred is pulling out of Sanford Communications, which means they will no longer need this tower, I believe. So I think they're changing frequencies. So I've got to go back to Matt and try to do a little more work there. My hope is to get the 12-town group more involved with this and get them to help reimburse us with the numbers, the $4,800 that's owed. But right now, we've had responsibility for the tower for the last 20 years. I think you, Tom, were on the committee when, if not when it was
10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. You were part of it.
You did the renewal.
Yeah, and
you signed the
Nancy,
renewal.
we found both names on it. So, like I say, it was a $1 lease until now. All of a sudden, she just decided that. I think she sees all these cell towers popping up and thinks she got a gold mine. Well, this is the highest paid tower out of all 3 in the emergency communication system.
I guess I'm a little,
I'm not real excited over it, but.
Out of all
yeah,
the ones that are using it?
as things stand now, it's in, and this is the part that concerns me, this is in the process of negotiation, and I think where the chief, you'll excuse that terminology, all chiefs are chiefs until they die, he's on the right path, but this agreement is by no means perfected, and so I guess I'd have to say at this point that I'm uncomfortable voting to recommend this to the town meeting, and the only condition that would change my mind if between now and the town meeting we had something more firm to vote on. I understand where you're headed, but having had a bad experience where the term negotiated was interpreted as also concluding a lease, where the term negotiate is flexible and can mean just the process of negotiating or negotiating and signing, I prefer not to go there. So having said that, I guess I am going to vote to not move this forward and hope that we can have something more firm by the town meeting.
Yeah.
Well, basically the 3 major things with this lease is the price. We've got that in the agreement, no more than $400 a month. The term of the lease, which is 10 years, and we have an out clause. Other than that, those are your 3 main things that you'd want to have in a lease.
Right.
Basically, this lease pretty much mirrors the lease, the past 20-year lease. The same law firm drew this up that did the last one. So, we can't go any more than the $400 a month. We can't go any more than the 10 years. She wanted 5. That may be the only thing that might change, is the 5 to 10. We told her that we would like to see 10. And like I say, we have an out clause in there.
Yep. I don't have any problem with where you're
I don't know
headed.
what else you'd want to see changed, but,
I'd just like to see the agreement that is going to be concluded and base my recommendation on that. And that's my only reservation at this point in time. And, I think at this point, I'm making a recommendation in the town meeting on an agreement that we don't know what it is yet. And so I don't think it's responsible for me to recommend the town meeting that they accept that. Having said that, I have no problem going on the floor of the town meeting if we have something that's firm and saying I'm withdrawing my, and supporting this. Because
she's got a copy of what you folks have now.
Yeah.
She's gonna look that over a couple of days and get back to us. She didn't seem to have any problems with what was in there, but, she can probably sign her copy of it and get it back to us.
Good.
We can't sign ours until, of course, after town meeting.
Right.
So, I don't know how binding that would be on her if we're not signing the same day.
You don't have to sign the same day.
Yeah, so.
It doesn't matter. If you have a signed agreement from her,
Yeah.
or an
Then we
indication
have
from
the
her
exact, yeah.
that she
My
will
hopes
work
is
on
when we go to town meeting, we will have the contract, in place.
that. Okay, I just want to.
Just that with the time crunch and whatnot, we couldn't get everything in place
Understand.
for tonight. I think
said-
part of it was our changing of attorneys too, kind of brought this to light and said, you might want to put that to town floor, that's true.
And then is your hope to try to get other towns to pay you?
Yes, pay us back, reimburse us back for it. Like I said, there's a 12, what's called the 12 town group. I don't know exactly their full,
The 10
Response.
towns of the 12 town group, is that?
yeah, and there's 9 out of the 12 that use the communication towers. There's 3 towers. There's one in Cornish, there's one in, there's the Blueberry Hill one, and there is one at Fort Ridge. Which makes up this communications network that 9 out of the 12 towns utilize for their fire and rescue. We happen to own one of the towers here in Acton, which was erected 20 years ago. My hopes is to get that split. Like I said, I think there's gonna be 8 towns involved. You're looking at $600 and something a piece. My calculator died as I was trying to figure that, but, probably hopefully the most we're ever gonna have to invest in it is our 9th or 8th portion of it. But right now, we need to be on board with the whole thing, just to get it in place.
But we possibly could be footing the whole bill.
We could be footing the whole bill, no more than 4,800.
But if the town meeting takes a dim view of this, or the Warrant and Finance Committee take a dim view of it, neighboring towns may be more interested in
Yeah,
support.
I mean, in
Town
talking,
meeting votes it down, we don't have a tower anymore, and we won't have any communication for fire and police on that side of town.
so, yeah, like I said, there's 9 towns that utilize it. Out of the 9 towns, it was Acton, Lebanon, North Berwick, Shapley, parts of Sanford when they're coming mutual aid. Those are the main towns that use this particular tower. It's called Channel 3. Like I said, the other 2 channels are the other side of town. Channel 2 is utilized. Channel 1, Acton doesn't use hardly at all, so, out of the 3 towers.
But the 12 towns already share the cost of the electricity for all 3
Yeah,
towns.
they pay the
So it's already an
electricity.
organization to
Yeah.
pay for this, we just
Yeah.
gotta meet with them. This just happened and we didn't have enough time to meet with them, so we
Yeah.
will do that, and I'm sure they'll take on their share, because, we got it for free for 20 years, so.
The issue is down at the bottom of Fox's Ridge. That's a real hole down there, and there's no communication down there without this. And it has always been a problem.
So, in item 3 here, this is more of a oops. We could change less to lessee. And then we have parties further agrees that. So presumably they further agree that, so. Not to say that it's necessarily changing it from a legal perspective, but you might want to
Yep.
fix a boo-boo or two. So, looking in Article 3, I assume there is a fence there now? I mean, so you say this is a copy of what's already been in place for umpteen years, so there should be a fence there, there's obviously equipment there.
Yep.
And did Acton put that up originally, or was it the coalition of 10 or 12 towns, or however many there were at the time?
Tom can probably answer that better than I can.
Acton didn't do it. It was
No.
originally a private assembly among a few radio and fire department
Yeah.
enthusiasts.
So we glommed onto it after the fact.
It was volunteered, and then
Yeah.
ultimately it evolved into a town expense.
The town negotiated the original lease for the land and whatnot.
The rest of it was done on
Yeah.
volunteer labor, pretty much.
Okay, thank you. And I already saw that the
equipment-
insurance policy, the $400,000 insurance policy thing, so that, this thing should be okay.
I should point out that even if the town meeting should opt to not authorize concluding this deal until some point in the future, that we're still have the opportunity to appropriate the appropriate rent, and I'm sure that the owner would be willing to think about it from week to week and month to month to continue to clarify the issues in the lease agreement, so.
Which, of course, could, and the numbers could go in either direction, of course.
Yes, they could. So, just because the town meeting decides not to authorize this particular contract or the conclusion of the contract, doesn't mean that we're out of the tower.
Yep.
I'm sure the owner would be very interested in
In
getting that money.
item 10 here, there's the phrase, like the fifth or sixth line down, it says, providing written notice of said same. How about written notice of same, perhaps?
That would be up to our attorney. I mean, he's the one who,
Okay, it's a very important legal phrase we need to keep intact. All right.
Maybe.
I think there was one other thing. Maybe not. Was it in 9? Talk about that.
Are you going to send that to Michelle with the highlighted
Oh,
on
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff? Okay, good, thank you.
Oh, well, if you want me to do that.
Yeah, if you would.
Oh, and in fact, I'll just review the whole thing, because it's the first time I've even looked at it, but.
Yeah, he just wrote it up this morning, so,
Sure.
you know, he had, well, actually, he's had it for a few days.
Okay, so
Yeah,
item
it was
item
the other one he
9,
was doing
I'm
today.
not going to quibble about editorial stuff here, I'm just sort of what it says. So, my understanding of, like, some of the things that were attempted was, you know, one of the things was perhaps to forgive taxes on the property, rather than paying the, you know, $400 a month, forgive taxes on the property. Now, was it taxes on
5.
the 2-acre footprint that we're talking about here, or taxes on the broader property?
just the
2
portion,
acre.
just the acreage.
Because, on the little piece?
On the loop, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so item 9 seems to suggest that there's no taxes paid on that anyway.
I think that's probably true.
So, you know, how could we offer to do something that we're
Right,
already
okay.
doing, I guess is my question.
Yeah, okay.
I think you raised another issue, too. The reference to taxes is inappropriate, because I think you're in violation of state law. I don't think the town has the power to say that somebody doesn't have to pay their taxes. I think the proper approach to that would be to reimburse taxes, that the town would vote to reimburse a tax or a portion of the taxes paid on the land. But I don't
Yeah, because the
think,
way this reads, it reads that we're paying the taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it
That's the
certainly
way it's
says.
been for the last 20
Right,
years,
right.
when you guys signed it.
But, okay, so then that leads to the question, have in fact the taxes been waived on this property for the last however many years? And if not, we've been in violation of the agreement.
No, because the 2 acres is not broken off from the big piece, so they're being evaluated, and I'm sure when we did the reeval, I'm sure O'Donnell's didn't know this lease existed, so I'm sure the tax value is based on the whole entire Blueberry Hill property, so.
I think we granted an abatement for a certain amount based on where the tower was years ago.
Yeah, we
That's the way that's
haven't signed one since I've been on.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that as well.
But, so, moving forward, though, the intent, though, is to pay $400 a month, plus rebate all the taxes for that property, apparently. Because that's what this lease
Against the
is.
leasehold premises, which is 2 acres, and the value was what, $11,000?
Yep.
$11,000 times $11.20.
Just understand that that's what we're talking
yeah.
about, you know, so
No,
effectively.
that's why we changed it to ask for, you know, here's what we're starting with. Can we have permission to continue talking with them? We won't go any more than this, but of course, we've got to correct, you know, what was from the old and what's from the new. Ed added on all the, you know, opportunities for us to get out early should technology change. And we don't need that tower anymore, so.
Right, and we have that, that
Yeah,
exercise.
so that's what he took the old lease and then added on what we thought we wanted on there, plus the money part, because that was never on there before. So if we gotta change the old part of the lease that we've had for the last 20 years, we'll have him go back and do that.
Yeah, it's in the old lease,
Yeah.
the way that you two
What's
signed
it
it.
say? Yeah, I believe it.
But how have we executed it is the question.
Yeah.
They just signed it, because it was free.
What does it say, what does it say, chief? I can't remember.
During the term of this lease agreement, leasee, at its sole cost and expense for the mutual benefit of the lessor, and leasee shall maintain comprehensive, wait a minute.
Yeah,
wrong-
it's-
Wrong one,
it's
next one
number
down.
9.
The parties hereby agree that the leasee shall be solely and exclusively responsible for any taxes assessed
That's us.
against the leasehold premises during the entire term of this lease.
Right, the leasehold premises, and what we did was, I think we granted an abatement on those 2 acres.
So, yeah,
That's the way
so
that works.
virtually says the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah.
But I really think that's illegal. I'm not sure. I think you're stuck with state law there.
Should we bring him up on charges?
I think I think we can pass at this point.
So, I think I'm gonna suggest here that, at least I would feel more comfortable doing this, that we basically make the motion of, oh crap. Because when this comes up for vote, I mean, at town meeting, I'm hoping that we'll actually see a real, live, actual negotiated thing, but we're not gonna, because we haven't given authority to do that yet. That's kind of the problem.
They can come to us with an agreement signed by her, and she's locked in. It's just the point that the town isn't locked in. The town can sign the agreement after the conclusion of the town meeting, if the town meeting votes to do that, okay? So what we are basically saying is, they have the right to negotiate this agreement, they just don't have the right to conclude it. Concluding is the act that binds the town. Negotiating it does not bind the town. So they don't even need permission to negotiate it. But they do need authorization to
Well,
conclude it and bind the
the
town.
way you're talking about, it essentially means that we're looking at a special town meeting to approve conclusion once we have
That may be the
a
case.
negotiated agreement in front of
No,
us.
if she wants to get paid, she'll sign this, we'll finish negotiations before town meeting, but we had to have something to go before you guys so you could make
Right.
make a motion on it. I don't see any reason why we won't have this, her signed and ready to go to the town floor. Now, had she not come in and asked for any money, we never would have gone to the town floor with this, we would have just signed it for another 10 years, because there was no changes or anything else. It's because it's gone from $1 a year, because, like we have $1 a year for the ambulance department, and I think actually we have $2 a year. We have $1 a year for their building and $1 a year for them having the ambulance and the fire department. And we would just renew that every time it came up without going to town meeting. Same thing would have happened here. It's because of all the changes in the money that's coming in that we're actually going to the town floor.
And we're binding the town for more than the life of this town meeting, so.
So what if we sort of have a general consensus to split the vote, just to get discussion, make sure we have discussion of both views on town floor, and make sure we have a completed, or at least a negotiated agreement. That's your expectation, correct? That you'll have something with a signature on it?
Today.
I do expect
By town
something back
meeting?
by the end of the week.
Okay, so that we'll at least have something more substantial to look at, and is it intended that agreement, partially executed agreement, will be posted to the web before town meeting, so we, all and sundry can look at it and
Yeah.
judge them themselves? Okay.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Because, right now,
Town meeting's what, the 16th,
14th?
14th? Yeah, so we've got quite a, yeah.
Yeah, the
We
polls
could have
are
out
the
there
10th,
plenty
and
of time for
Saturday's
you
the
to look at
14th.
it before town meeting.
That kind of makes sense. We really don't have enough to really judge right now. There's too many unknowns, but obviously we want to move forward, and if we can get a completed agreement, or essentially half-executed agreement that we can look at and make an actual judgment on, by town meeting, and obviously we can do all this business on town floor, That to me makes the most sense. You know, we're not the fly in the ointment, but we're expressing cautious reserve that we don't have all the facts yet.
What's the motion on the floor right now?
Right now, the motion on the floor is to approve as written.
Okay.
So if we just basically split that, get some discussion on town floor, explain what's going on here, and obviously by that time, we should have a more substantial document in front of us, and then we can, you know, vote as we will.
I've already said I'm going to vote no on it.
Okay?
And reserve my right to change my argument on the floor of the town meeting,
Exactly true.
so.
Okay,
I don't know if that
so
makes a
any
split,
further
but-
discussion to move this ship
Hard to
forward?
split
Or
five.
or do we have
I don't
more
even know that we need to
more
split
discussion?
Anytime you don't go unanimous, somebody on the floor wants to know
absolutely.
why there was one that voted the opposite way. That automatically brings discussion.
I have found that to be very productive in the past.
It has, yeah.
Which is why I'm suggesting what I'm suggesting, that, you know, it wasn't a unanimous thing. We got some things to talk about here at town meeting, and presumably we'll have a more substantial document in front of us when we do that. And we can actually make real decisions based on real facts. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 23 as written, so signify. I'm going to say, yeah, baby.
I will.
Okay. So,
Wait a minute.
okay, let's go with 3 and 2. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got Nancy and Joan and myself.
3,
Okay.
4?
All opposed?
You're dissenting.
I'm descending?
You're
I
a
thought
dissenter.
Paul that
You
was-
dissenter, you.
I was going with
Are you
it.
counting dissenters
Jeez,
now?
I am counting dissenters
I
now,
don't want
and I assume,
them not being
okay.
able to have their tower, or I just want to put that
And
out
who
there.
was the no's? Tom and, who was the other no?
Holly and
Holly and
Tom.
Tom.
Okay.
Yes. I was the designated dissenter
That
last time.
was kind of a sneaky way around it. because
Purely for,
Well,
It kept me when he said that it's
If you'd like to
possible they could-
re-vote, I'm
Well, the road commissioners,
Yeah.
the road commissioners don't use it. You use the one out behind us.
Doesn't matter. I wouldn't want my fire, the fire department not to have it. I mean,
Well, if I point.
That would be abstention, not voting in the negative.
wait till tomorrow. Scott's gonna be right at me about it. Holy crap.
This won't be on for a couple of days, so.
You'll
You got a couple of
hear
days.
it through the grapevine.
I believe the
You can
discussion
vote in
was
the
clear
affirmative
enough.
on Article 24, it's coming up.
I can't vote when it has to do with that.
Okay, so 24. Okay, so 24, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $4,800 for the Blueberry Communication Tower lease.
Recommend adoption of the article as written.
Do we have a second?
second,
Been moved and recommended moved and seconded, thank you, I'm getting a little punchy here, to recommend approval of Article 24 as written. Tom, take it away.
I have nothing more to say on this article except,
Except what I'll say on the bottom.
sounds like you're right. Even if we do not conclude an agreement, and I'm pointing this out, even if we do not conclude an agreement as requested by Article 23, we still have the money to pay the owner of Blueberry Hill the $400 a month that she wishes to receive until such time as an agreement can be concluded, or the town meeting can agree on an agreement, or we find some other option to resolve our communication issues. And that's why I'm in favor of adopting the article as written.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 24 as written, so signify. Thank you. It's unanimous, motion carries. And Article 23, the motion did carry as well. Our vote was 3-2. Article 25. And we know we're going to be picking up the pace here. Article 25, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $10,800 to purchase SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department, Department 10403.
Recommend adoption of the article as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 25 as written. On the floor for discussion. This is basically the third, I think the third, yes, the third of successive years. We may see yet another year or two of this, or more possibly, but basically we're third consecutive year of aging hardware swap out / rotation, and very definitely for safety purposes here. We want to make sure we're compliant with current standards for compatibility with other departments' fire trucks, and we want to make sure that the equipment just plain functions. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to recommend approval of Article 25 as written, so signify. Thank you. Unanimous, the motion carries. Article 26. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $30,000 to add to the capital improvement fund for the fire department toward the future purchase of a new fire truck. Looking for a motion.
Move recommendation of, move to recommend the article, approve the article as recommended, I don't know.
Recommend the article as written, Nancy, is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to suggest here that us old folks, you know, it's getting to be
Yes.
8:30.
Yeah.
And we might want to consider, yeah, I said that.
Coming
My
back
birthday's
tomorrow night?
My birthday's tomorrow.
Coming back to your brother.
Is anybody going to suggest a second to that motion,
second.
which I will clarify shortly? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of Article 26 as written. On the floor for discussion. Nancy, you get first pick if you want.
I have nothing to say.
Alrighty. Okay, so essentially we're attempting to avoid needing a huge loan to purchase the next fire truck. So we're getting ahead of the curve. We haven't fully deployed effectively, actively our current fire truck. We're still in testing mode. But we want to be proactive here and try to have a substantial fund so that next time around, we're not going to be going after taxation excessively. We're going to spread it over multiple years. Any further to add, Ted, on that?
They're looking at a tanker, right?
Yeah, tanker probably.
Tanker within the next 5 years for about 300 grand. So that's what we're trying to save for.
250 to 300.
Yeah.
So maybe have half of it, or hopefully better, in hand before we.
Well, what we've done is, when Ed was chief, 2009, started the $50,000 a year towards the new truck that we just bought. Then we upped it to 100 or 75? 75. We upped it because all of a sudden that engine blew. So we got it up as high as we could. So now what we want to do is not have to rush the next time we know we need something or something dies on us. So, because we were still paying now we're paying for $55,000 a year for the loan, and we were paying $55,000 a year for the re-eval. We were bringing that amount down, but we're working it back up to the $50,000 a year. So this year, Michelle recommended that we put in $30,000 because we have a half a year on the re-eval, and then we're done. So next year, we would recommend $50,000 to the capital improvement fund for the fire department, and of course, the $55,000 that we have to pay for the yearly payment too.
Thank you. Effectively, and historically, how much could one expect the price of a pricey fire truck to go up on an annual basis? I mean, are we keeping ahead of the curve here?
About the same rate as healthcare.
Yeah. So, I mean, are we just sort of marking time in place here, more or less?
It's fairly stable right now.